The original U.S. COVID hotspot, New York City, currently a microcosm of pretty much all the hardship the disease has created. That includes joblessness, small businesses suffering, an uneven rollout of the coronavirus vaccine, and fears over new strains of the virus. Joining us right now to talk about all of this is a man who wants to run New York City. Mayoral candidate and former Democratic presidential candidate Andrew Yang is with us. Andrew, it's great to see you today. Help us with this. New York is a microcosm of the country, and one of the things we're seeing is lots of people fleeing New York City. We're also seeing them flee other high-tax states like California and elsewhere. What would you do to both keep them from going and hopefully bring them back?
Well, you're 100% right that what's happening in New York City is emblematic of what many communities are struggling with, taken to a higher extreme. Because New York is more densely populated, the costs are higher in many neighborhoods. And so what we have to do is rebuild the value proposition that makes New York City the destination for business, for culture, for commerce, for families, for schools. And that starts with the vaccine. We definitely need to improve the rollout of the vaccine here in New York City because we're having appointments canceled. And that's incredibly frustrating for those of us who want to see New York City get back on its feet as quickly as possible.
But speak to the issue of taxes and the economy. You know, for many years, I thought that people actually weren't that mobile, that people would stay in a place like New York City. People would stay in a place like San Francisco because of the ecosystem. Now you're seeing some of the wealthiest New Yorkers who represent some of the biggest tax dollars for the city fleeing to places like Miami. In California, people flying and moving effectively to places like Austin. What would you do about that?
I talked to some of those individuals and people who are running organizations, Andrew, and the reason why they've been based in New York City for so long is because the talent is more densely concentrated here and they can build stronger organizations. So what we have to do is we have to make it so that those families that have made New York City their home, have their schools open, they can enjoy all of the opportunities here that we've taken advantage of for so long, but it's all about the talent. If you feel like you can move your organization to someplace else and still have the same level of efficacy as an organization, that's really the key differentiator. And New York City has had the talent advantage for years and decades, and that's what we have to preserve and in some cases recover.
But you understand the world of technology better than most. And I think it's clear that one of the lessons of this pandemic is we're all doing this remotely. I actually am in New York City, but I could be in Hawaii interviewing you and potentially working with you. People live on Slack today. Doesn't that change this dynamic of talent in one city?
There are some people like you and I who might be able to beam in from anywhere, but you have to think about the folks who are coming up within organizations, Andrew. And I've talked to CEOs and they say, and I know this because I've been here too, it is very hard to build a culture over Zoom. You know, like if you're someone like you who's been in the field for years or more, then you have a following, you can do your work from anywhere. But if you're still trying to develop and then climb within an organization or even understand what that organization is about, you have to be around other people in that organization. And that is what New York City has provided for so many organizations, big and small, for years and decades. And that still is what New York City provides. It's very, very hard to have a young person develop remotely, you know, from day one. It's very difficult.
Andrew, it's Becky. Thank you for being with us today. I think one of the things Andrew's getting at is this idea that taxes are so high already and they're going to grow. Governor Cuomo has already put forth a budget that would raise New York City taxes to 14.7% for the highest earners. That's the highest in the country. I know you have plans to do things like to make sure you're giving checks to people on a regular basis in New York City. And I just wonder how you pay for that and how you deal with a tax structure that's already so stretched to the highest levels in the country.
Well, I think you know I'm a numbers guy. There are opportunities to generate revenue in New York City, so it shouldn't all be about increasing taxes. But again, it has to be about reconstituting the value proposition, because the fact is that there have been people who've been paying higher taxes in New York City for a long time. Like it's not news to them that that taxes are higher here. And there are many people who have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in different ways in New York City and need the city to come back. So there are folks who are more mobile, but there are folks who are very deeply entrenched here. And because of the vastness of the New York City economy, if New York City was a country, it would be the 11th biggest economy in the world. It's a very large, diverse economy, and there are many organizations that are very place-based here that will be here for years to come, and they're the ones that are trying to invest in the recovery.
But just to the tax piece, because I think it is critical. New York's always had high taxes. There's no question. And people have been willing to pay those taxes for the benefits that the city provided. Now there are questions about policing in the city. There are questions about safety in the city. Clearly, in a post-pandemic world, the world of theater and all of the accoutrements that the city has provided for so many may not be as appealing as before. And I want to read you this is from the Wall Street Journal, an op-ed that said, even if this is not me, this is the writer, even if I were indifferent to working the first 8 months of the year for the government, and by the way, that's the tax piece we're talking about, 8 months at the highest tax rate. What about my employees and the many talented and ambitious young people who are the future of New York? How will they feel about the difficulty in building a business and a life in a city and state that are driving away their tax base and will face declining public service? This is from the Wall Street Journal.
Again, people have been willing to pay a premium to be here in New York City because of the opportunities, both to them individually and as people who are trying to grow businesses. You know, having run businesses myself, again, the key is talent. If you feel like you can get the talent you need in an environment like New York City, then you will pay a premium. And we've seen over and over again that pays off, because we're in a very, very competitive economy where the winners tend to take in more of the value. So if you think that being in New York City is your recipe for success, then it's worth some extra money. And so really the key is whether that recipe for success still holds. And I'm convinced that it does. As someone who's run organizations, it is very, very hard, again, to build up a culture if everyone's in 5 different places over Zoom. You can do that if the people are more experienced and have been there for a while, but from day one, it's very, very hard.
Andrew, speak to the issue of policing in New York. There are a number of large businesses and small that are calling for law and order. They suggest that the next mayor should be much more focused on law and order. At the same time, there are important protests taking place in this city and around the country about Black Lives Matter, and the relationship between the public and the police does appear to be strained. What do you do about it?
Well, you have to do both things at once, Andrew, where you need to bring down the crime rate, let people know that it's safe to walk the streets at night. And a lot of this is around foot traffic and emptiness. I mean, we're missing 60 million tourists, over 10,000 small businesses have shut down, and that's leading to an atmosphere of lower safety. And at the same time, as you suggested, you need to change the culture of the NYPD so that people don't fear civil rights abuses at the hands of police officers, particularly if you're a person of color in the city. So these two things are not mutually exclusive. You can do them both. But I'm going to suggest that the key, again, is the vaccine, because if you have reopening storefronts and more people walking the street, then that's going to be a safer street.
Andrew Yang, we appreciate you joining us this morning. We hope to follow your progress and continue to have these conversations throughout the election period. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Andrew. Have a great day.
You bet. You too. Thanks.
Put the money in our hands. Put the money in our hands. Put the money in our hands. Put the money in our hands.
Can we afford it? Yes. Will it cause inflation? No. Is it awesome? Yes. Is anyone trying to make it happen? Yeah, that guy.